In part 1 we got off to a great start with Jon Mann bagging 2 40s in the first 2 nights, and then he had the fish of a lifetime in the shape of an 87 pound common. I chose not to fish the first 2 days because for me the social side is just as important as the fishing. I only see most of our European sales team once a year, so a week on the bank together was a real luxury. That didn't mean that I wasn't watching my swim like a hawk, and after seeing fish show at about 80 yards, I started to fish on the 3rd night. I'd baited a wide area with a throwing stick for 24 hours before casting the rigs, and on my 2nd night of fishing my patience was rewarded with a proper chunky mirror. It's always a massive buzz to get your first one from a new lake, and with it being the end of November and with the swim being one of the less popular on the lake, I was well chuffed to have created a chance.
Come on, big fella. 52 pound, check that out. Look at the shoulders on it. And the sling was absolutely full of boilie. Olivier here is letting us retain the fish overnight, which he doesn't normally do, but with the water being so cold, there's very, very little risk to the fish, and you get to see them in all their glory. But for me tonight, I'm putting match the hatch hook baits on, because if the fish are really switched on to what I'm feeding, and I fed a lot more yesterday, nearly 2 kilos, then that's what I want to have on the end. But check that out, what a fish. Thank you very much. One last look. Yeah. The rig I nailed that amazing 52 pounder on is one that I've used on this kind of venue pretty much all over France. And it's basically a combi rig, so it's a combination of materials. In this case I'm using the new boom material, which is very, very stiff. I crimp it at either end and it basically pushes the hook bait away from the lead when you cast in. And at the moment when we've got a big wind blowing, it's really important that the rig doesn't tangle, and you have to hit it harder than normal, which can cause problems, and that boom just keeps everything separate, and so you know it's sitting on the bottom absolutely perfect. So basically I'll crimp a 5-inch section, so I'm crimping to a size 8 ring swivel at one end, and at the other end I'm crimping a little tiny loop. And then basically to that I'm attaching a loop of line which is tied out of armour cord, which is one of the braided lines, and that's got the hook attached to it as well. So that's the combination. So you've got a very, very stiff mono and then quite a stiff braid at the end, but because it is softer than the mono, it still acts like a normal combi rig, and the hook turns and flips and catches hold. So tying the hook section is a little bit more complicated, but once you've done them, basically the boom remains all the time. You snip off the end bit, rethread another one on, and you're ready to go in seconds. So basically I fold over a bit of 30 pound armour cord, so that it's about 6 inches long when it's folded. I poke the loop part of it through the eye of the hook, coming out the front of the hook, and then tie my favourite whipping knot. You make a big loop underneath the hook with both bits of line, and you only have to do 3 turns round the hook. Because it's doubled over, you end up with a 6-turn knot. So basically loop down towards the eye of the hook, and then pull the 2 tag ends tight, and the knot is done. Move it down towards the eye of the hook, and then you'll find you've got 2 hairs sticking out the top of the knot. Cut one of those off, the knot never slips, never lost anything like that at all, so you end up with one single piece of line. I then put a rig ring onto that, tie a simple overhand knot in that to lock it in place right at the top of the shank near to the bend, and then I tie the loop for my hair, and I've got the bait probably 5 mil away from the hook. The hook I'm using is a size 4 wide gape X, which is heavily sharpened, a very, very strong hook, but is super, super sharp as well, and it was absolutely nailed that fish in the centre of the bottom lip. And to finish it off, before I loop it on, I put one of the medium kickers on, pull that up so it kicks the hook link at a nice acute angle, and then you literally go through the little tiny loop you've created in the end of the boom, over the top of the hook, and loop it on. That's it. Bait then goes on. In this case I've got an 18mm mainline wafter that I've soaked in Mystic Spice goo. That gives it a lovely sort of egg yolky yellow colour. I've used that to good effect on loads of different places all around the world, so I just went in with what I knew would work. And lead system wise, it's just a simple lead clip, but in this case I've actually fished it running. So I've got a little tiny bit of tubing poked into the lead clip before I pull the swivel in. I've got a 3.5 ounce distance lead on to basically punch into the wind. It's really important to fish accurately here because there's a lot of weed out there, and I will cast 3 or 4 times and fill the lead down each time just to know I'm on a clear spot. And to neaten that up and stop the lead coming off, I've got rubber connector and then about 14 inches of dark matter rig tube. That's really, really good for anti-tangle, and it helps everything lay flat down on the bottom. So the rig basically is quite a simplistic looking rig, but with that little tiny bit of silicone tubing pulled into the lead clip, what it basically means is when the fish picks it up, as it shakes its head, it can't use the weight of the lead to get rid of the hook, and then basically lead starts sliding away from the fish. We've seen that on the underwater films, and then you get an absolutely screaming take. And from that 52, I've got an absolute belter. So it's a really nicely balanced rig, it's really well camouflaged, and it never tangles.
Iron, or RJ as we know him, has been back out in the boat and re-echoed his swim after his original spots near the island snags didn't produce, and his efforts have been rewarded with a lovely clean mirror on his first night out in deeper water. RJ visits tackle shops in the north of Holland, which is the area of Europe most like the UK, with high concentrations of anglers, loads of shops in close proximity and some really awesome fishing. RJ targets the biggest fish in his area, usually on highly pressured waters, which has honed his skills superbly.
Vanochtend eindelijk na lang wachten de aanbeet. Ik moest een beetje zoeken. De stek die ik heb, waar ik het mee moet doen, is vrij ondiep. Ik heb alleen dichter onder de kant. Ik vis richting een eiland. Standaard zou je zeggen, we gaan richting een eiland vissen, de vis houdt zich daar op. Maar dat is op het moment gewoon absoluut niet waar. De vis zoekt de diepere plekken. Daar ben ik super blij mee. Eindelijk vis. De vissen die Jon ving naast mij op de linkerzijde, daar komen wat meer van het wijd. Dat heeft mij doen besluiten dat ik met mijn middelste hengel verder weg wilde vissen dan de andere hengels die ik nu uit heb liggen. En die heb ik gewoon gezocht, een plek van het eiland af waar die iets verder afliep. Uiteindelijk heb ik een plateau gevonden met een klein gultje. Ja, en daar ligt hij nu net overheen en daar heb ik die aanbeet gekregen. Dus dat blijkt gewoon echt hopelijk een trekroute te zijn voor die vis. Het aas wat ik op dit moment gebruik is de fiber boilie van Mainline. Ik moet heel eerlijk zijn, het is de eerste keer dat ik er überhaupt mee vis. Danny heeft het meegenomen om te gebruiken hier deze week. Het grote voordeel van dit aas is dat ik zit niet met 20 mm boilies te vissen, maar met een 10 mm boilie. Dat is heel klein. Het grote voordeel is dat je heel erg kunt verspreiden. Fantastisch, heerlijk. Hiervoor gaan we naar Frankrijk. Waanzinnig toch? Mooie winterkarper. Toch nog weten te vangen. Liggen weliswaar in wintermodus. Deze voor het iets betere weer toch niet weer staan. Super, ik ben heel blij mee. Nu ik een aanbeet heb, wat een beetje het probleem is dat je dan denkt van we gaan het voer opkrikken, er moet meer voer in. In de winterperiode is dat echt heel gevaarlijk, nu is het weer gunstig. Maar ik zal pas het voer echt omhoog gooien als ik morgenochtend weer een aanbeet heb. Heb ik dat niet, zal ik het eerder nog naar beneden doen dan dat ik nog meer voer ga doen. Je moet oppassen dat je er niet te veel in gooit, want je kan het er niet uithalen. Alles wat te veel gaat is goed, niet goed. Bij het begin eigenlijk van het opbouwen van de stek heb ik ongeveer een kilo of 2 van de 10 mm fiberboilies in een emmertje gegooid. En ik heb water uit het meer gepakt en die heb ik gesookt. Het grote voordeel daarvan is, het is algemeen bekend, zeker op betaalwateren, dat de vissen, de boilies die vers zijn, die laten ze echt liggen. Ik heb zelf veel ervaringen daarmee, en zeker met betaalwateren. Een groot voordeel daarvan is als je ze washed out doet. Ik heb er goede ervaringen mee. Ik doe het dus nu standaard. Ik gooi ze bij aankomst in het water en die gebruik ik om te voeren. Ik zal niet een standaard boilie uit de verpakking zo erin schieten. Maar dat is een persoonlijke voorkeur. Maar dat doe ik elke keer als ik eigenlijk op een betaalwater kom. Ja. Voor wat betreft het materiaal wat ik op dit moment gebruik is eigenlijk alles erop toegespitst dat je afstanden kunt halen. wil niet zeggen dat je afstanden gaat gooien. Ik zit met 3/3/4 hengels te vissen en Basia rails. Dat kan afstanden gooien, maar daar kun je ook prima mee onder de kantje vissen. Ik ben dus begonnen met een afstand van 22 reps en er ligt nu 1 hengel op 30 reps. Je moet het kunnen gooien. Als je materiaal meeneemt wat niet toereikend is ook zonde. Als je net die 10, 20 meter extra niet kunt gooien, want die haal je niet. En we mogen hier niet uitvaren met de boot, dus we moeten het gooien. Daarom neem je dus de hengels mee waar je toereikend zijn voor het water waar je op dat moment vist. Nou, dit is de rig waar ik eigenlijk afgelopen jaar erg veel vertrouwen in gekregen heb. Ik moet zeggen, ik heb hem langzaamaan opgebouwd. Het eerste deeltje is min of meer aan het begin van het seizoen gekomen met filmen van de masterclass met Kevin. Daar zijn we gaan vissen met de IQ-D-rig. Ja, die D-rig die heeft gewoon het grote voordeel dat hij eigenlijk altijd weer goed terechtkomt bij het oppikken van een vis en weer uitspugen. Ik heb het nu aangepast met een boomdeel, 55 pond, zware versie. Ik krimp de boom met een klein lusje aan het einde, dark matter braid, met een knotless knot en een D-stukje. En daarop gewoon een klein haakaasje en een IB korn. Het is een wafter en hij valt gewoon plat op de bodem.
I put Julien in swim 4, which didn't do a bite last week because I know he's a top angler who can work out a swim quickly and so make the most of it, just like Daryl Peck. He's also a big caster for a slim guy, which suits this swim with super long range spots behind the sunken trees. Julien serves tackle shops in the northeast of France. He's well known in the French carp scene and has caught them from all over his home country. Julien's week started slowly with just a few bream, but he's had his first carp now and he's starting to get into the zone.
La première carpe, j'avais déjà fait 2 brèmes. Donc celle-ci, joli poisson pris à longue distance. Je suis obligé de pêcher sur le côté de l'île là-bas. J'ai à peu près 130-135 mètres de distance. Donc avec le vent de travers, les 2-3 premiers jours, c'était pas évident. Hier soir, il y a eu une grosse accalmie et puis le temps s'est adouci. Donc ça a plutôt joué en ma faveur. J'ai fait une première brème et puis à 3h30 du matin, ce joli petit poisson. J'espère pouvoir faire encore quelques plus grosses, mais c'est déjà chouette. Sur un Combi Rig, un morceau de boom avec un morceau d'arme à corde pour éviter de s'en mêler. Et un wafter fiber, les nouvelles bouillettes mainline. Super. Quand je suis arrivé, on m'a donné ce poste du coup. C'est un poste où je peux exploiter aussi bien de la pêche d'obstacles que j'aime bien faire ou de la pêche à longue distance. Donc j'avais plusieurs possibilités et du coup j'ai tenté de mettre entre guillemets une technique. Je sais que les poissons se tiennent souvent entre les 2 îles derrière et le but était de pouvoir les intercepter dès qu'elles pouvaient sortir de ces 2 îles. J'ai décidé du coup d'utiliser les bouillettes sel mainline que j'ai coupées en 2 parce que je pêche en fait une zone où ça descend gentiment, donc le fait de les couper en 2 me permet de pouvoir éviter qu'elles roulent et qu'elles descendent dans les herbes. Donc en fait j'ai un couloir à pêcher, il y a l'île, il y a 2 arbres morts qui sont coulés contre l'île à gauche et du coup ensuite j'ai à peu près 10 mètres de large, ensuite j'ai de l'herbe, donc j'ai un vrai couloir à pêcher où il y a du sable et du gravier. Et du coup, il faut que je lance sur ce couloir-là. J'ai amorcé une zone assez large parce qu'en lançant du bord, ça fait une distance assez conséquente. Je dois lancer à peu près à 130-135 mètres. Donc quand il n'y a pas de vent comme aujourd'hui, ça se fait à peu près bien. Mais quand on a le vent de travers, c'est un peu compliqué. Donc c'est vrai que pouvoir amorcer une zone un peu plus large, ça permet de pouvoir tomber un peu plus à droite ou à gauche et pouvoir quand même pêcher correctement. Après, pour l'èche, je vais juste utiliser un wafter. J'aime bien utiliser les èches équilibrées, surtout l'hiver. Parce que les poissons sont quand même beaucoup plus méfiants. Donc c'est vrai que quand ils vont commencer à s'alimenter sur le spot, j'aime que les lèches équilibrées arrivent tout de suite. C'est la première chose qui bouge sur le fond et qui peut attirer un petit peu leur curiosité et du coup s'en saisir le plus rapidement possible. En fait, pour lancer loin, il est vrai que le gabarit peut aider. J'ai mon collègue Franck qui est juste à côté, qui est quand même qui est bien taillé. Hein. Il est quand même il est bien charpenté. C'est vrai qu'il a plus d'amplitude et c'est quand même c'est un lancer qui va être différent. Il n'a pas besoin de prendre de l'élan comme moi je prends. Moi j'ai quand même besoin je suis pas très grand, je suis pas très costaud. Par contre je suis nerveux, donc je prends de l'élan et j'élance mon plomb en arrière. Je mets un plomb un peu plus lourd du coup que lui peut utiliser. Je monte en 140 grammes du coup pour pouvoir lancer là. Et après je suis qu'en 12 pieds. C'est vrai que si j'avais eu des cannes de 13 pieds, je pense que j'aurais pu gagner encore un petit peu plus. J'utilise des Basia, des cannes Daiwa Basia, Basia DF en 12 pieds, 3 livres 75. Donc il existe les 13 pieds. Avec les 13 pieds, on va gagner encore un petit peu plus en distance, mais j'ai déjà les 12 pieds. C'est vrai que c'est quelque chose d'un peu plus polyvalent pour moi, vu que je pêche de temps en temps aussi en bateau. 13 pieds, ça peut être un peu gênant, donc le 12, c'est vraiment le bon compromis pour moi. Du coup, je pense qu'on a passé le plus compliqué de la session, parce qu'on arrive après, on arrive sur un temps qui va être plus doux. Un vent qui va être plutôt bien orienté, pas trop fort, et une pression atmosphérique qui va baisser. Donc du coup, c'est vrai qu'à mon avis, les poissons vont se mettre un peu en activité. Et c'est vrai que moi, je fais le poisson sur la nuit qui m'a semblé la plus agitée. J'ai entendu des poissons sauter pendant la nuit. Pendant mon combat, j'en ai entendu un ou deux. Pendant le temps que je relance, etc., j'avais entendu encore d'autres poissons, donc le temps de se rendormir aussi. Donc c'est vrai que je pense qu'on a passé le plus compliqué. Il faisait très froid, on a eu une nuit hyper fraîche. À 22 h, c'était déjà gelé partout. Donc je pense que là, il fait beaucoup plus doux. Même si on est sur une berge où on n'a pas le soleil la journée, il fait un peu froid par rapport à en face où ils ont le soleil. Je pense qu'il nous reste 3 nuits et on devrait pouvoir toucher un peu plus de poissons. Je pense qu'il va s'en faire encore quelques-uns. Ils vont se mettre en activité et il va falloir remettre un petit peu d'appât pour réussir à toucher encore quelques poissons et à optimiser toutes les touches. Mais je pense que la suite des événements risque d'être un peu plus agitée. Ouais.
The ever-consistent Jon Mann in the left-hand side of swim 10 had his full fish in 4 nights by sticking to his guns and not using the boat. In contrast to Julien, he baited lightly with a throwing stick, fishing a higher track wafter and an inline lead system over a wide spread of boilies. Good skills, Johnny.
Weather has just gone absolutely biblical now. I mean, you just kill for this weather at the end of November. It's about probably 13, 14, maybe 15 degrees now. Southerly wind blowing straight into me. And I've chosen to put more bait out because I've had a bite and they're obviously responding to it. Just putting out a mixture of 15mm fibre and 18mm cell. They fit nicely into the spom together. It's just going out 21 rod lengths onto the spot. And what I do is I put probably 3 or 4 spoms out at that range over each rod. The rods are spaced out quite wide, probably 20 yards between the left and right hand rods, all at the same range, all on a clear patch that's got bits of weed sort of in between it. That's why I'm having to space the rods out so much. And then once I've done that, I'll put a few spoms out longer. Go. And I've noticed from underwater filming that you don't want all your bait landing right on top of one another. So I'm spreading it out, not really spomming in the same place twice. And take it out of the clip now, and it's clipped up another 6 foot further, so I'm dropping maybe a dozen spoms on the area where my rigs are landing, and then another, I don't know, half a dozen to a dozen beyond it, 6 foot beyond it, just to spread the bait out. These are great big fish, and with these warm temperatures they're obviously starting to feed. And I had my bite over about 1 kilo of bait last night, that amazing 52-pound mirror. And with the weather improving, I've decided to put 2 kilos out today. We're so lucky with the weather. Last week they had gloomy weather all week long. The fish didn't really show. I heard a couple of fish last night showing. It's obvious now that they're moving around. There's more bites going on all around the lake. And this change in temperature and wind direction has obviously turned them on. We were told in advance actually that that spomming the bait out actually caused a reduction in action for the anglers fishing around the islands at long range. They said it was much better to go out in the boat and spray the bait from the boat, which some of the guys here are doing. That's another great tactic. Put the marker float out, scull out in the boat short of your spot, and then catapult the bait the rest of the way. And if I had a boat in my swim and had been using it since the start, I probably would have done that, but I did this yesterday. It worked last night, so I'm repeating the process just with a bit more bait. That is 2 kilos, and very, very important to let the fish activity, what people are seeing, what people are catching, and the temperature at this time of year sort of determine how much you're putting in. A lot of people just do it as standard, put the same amount out every day, no matter whether it's blowing a northerly or a southerly, and whether it's 2 degrees or 12 degrees, and that can work against you. So if you let the action around the lake determine how you're going to bait up, you will definitely get more bites.
Well, what a wicked night's fishing. I finally managed to get 2 bites in a night, but not quite as I'd expected. I had one down on the main bite spot and had that so early, only just after 9 p.m, that I thought I'm going to get another chance at 3 o'clock in the morning, but it didn't happen. However, just after 4 o'clock this morning, my new spot that I found off the side of the island roared into life. I was fishing with a really tight clutch because there's a few snags. I didn't want it to gain too much line. So as soon as I got the bite, I was on the rod and just walked backwards with a tight clutch, just pulling it away. No reeling, no chance of letting the fish get under the island. Worked a treat, quite a lot of weed between me and the fish, which just kept a really tight line, and you could almost feel the weed tearing as it was coming out, and thankfully it made the net. Interestingly though, up until last night, I've had 2 other guys to my right, Marco and Davide, and I'm not sure if it's had an effect, but Marco said he had a rod over towards that area, but with there then being another 5 lines crossing out into that open zone, I wonder if it sort of stopped the fish coming round there and stopping for a feed. With my 1 line going out there and just sort of a smattering of bait, I probably put half a kilo of free offerings down. I think they had a bit more freedom to come round. I started getting liners, they clearly started to get their heads down, and thankfully found the hook bait. And at 38.4, it's my biggest so far. We did manage to nick 2 bites last night, but not off what's been the main spot. My new spot's produced 38.25 as well, so it's my biggest so far, and with a night to go, 2 spots rocking, you can't help but wonder, is tonight the night? Either way, I'm buzzing. Whenever I fish a new lake, that could be back in the UK or anywhere else in the world, I like to cast a rig out that gives me extreme confidence. A rig that I've used everywhere and it's consistently caught me carp. I just know that when it hits the bottom, it's going to be presented. And out here at Trois Iles, I've been using my boom combi. It consists of a 25-pound boom section of 6 inches long, and it's crimped both ends. So under this part here, as you can see there, I've crimped a loop. That's then covering up the quick change swivel with a piece of dark matter anti-tangle sleeve, just to ensure that it can't come off. And at the other end, under the putty here, is also another loop. That's crimped much, much smaller. Now the clever bit is the bit that I do with the supernatural braid. Rather than tying a knot to piece the 2 pieces together, I actually tie the hook sections completely separate. So I take a length of supernatural, tie a hair loop in it, and obviously gauge how long it needs to be for whatever type of bait I'm using, tie an 11-turn knotless knot, and then tie another very small loop coming off the other end, which is this bit that you'll see here. You then simply thread the loop of braid through the loop in the boom and pass the hook through and do like a loop-to-loop knot. And quite simply, it's ready to go. I like to put a nice big blob of putty over here for 2 reasons. One, it tidies everything up. Where you've crimped the boom, it can leave a very small stiff section which could lead to tangles if you're not careful. And secondly, the blob of putty really helps to keep the hook facing down when a fish picks it up, ensuring that you're more likely to hook them in the bottom lip. Bait wise, it's a balanced out bait. I've got an 18mm cell on the bottom, and on the top that's a 12mm peaches and cream wafter that's been soaked for quite a while in some buttercorn goo. So when it sits, the hook lays flat, the bait quite simply sits next to it, but what it means, having that little bit of balance to it, no matter how this lands, the bait is always going to fall away and present itself perfectly. Now we all know, we've watched plenty of underwater footage of carp picking up your rig and spitting it out and getting away with it, and I'm under no illusion that this happens with this rig too, but the most important feature is the fact that it will reset every time. Because that's balanced, because I've got a stiff boom section, it's always going to push away should the carp get away with it, and it's ready for when the next one comes along. Going to get it back out now, see if we can nick a daytime bite. When fishing to snags, no matter what form they're in, be it weed, lily pads, tree roots, whatever, you need a really tight line. You need to make sure that you're fishing with a locked up clutch as well, so that under no circumstances can the fish get into the snag, because all that will ever happen, or 9 times out of 10, is you end up pulling, your line snaps, and the fish is ultimately left with some form of rig left in its mouth to get rid of at a later point. If you do everything correctly, you may get less bites because your line's not nice and slack, but you'll certainly land more of the ones that you hook, and that is far more important. Fish safety has always got to be number one.
RJ's had another 40 plus mirror from his 30 wrap spot, fishing well away from the island. 2 good fish on the bounce proves he was right to copy the others and move rods into deeper open water areas. Being open-minded like this is a key aspect of successful angling. All the best laid plans go out the window when the carp decide not to follow the rules. RJ has adapted well and gone from 0 to hero.
Kijk eens aan, waanzinnig. Het heeft even geduurd. De eerste vis kwam eigenlijk vrij onverwachts. Ik moet heel eerlijk zeggen dat ik op deze gehoopt had. En daar moet ik mee zeggen, de stek waar ik vanaf het begin ben begonnen met opbouwen, zijn takken die in het water liggen. Veel takken eigenlijk. En net voor die takken leek het schoon. Op de dieptemeter kon ik dat goed zien. Ik ben gaan voeren in de takken en uiteindelijk wachten op het moment dat die vissen eruit zou trekken. En deze was vanochtend de klos. Helemaal blij mee. Super. Hiervoor gaan we naar Frankrijk op het moment.
Maurice, fishing in swim 1, arrived later in the week and certainly had his work cut out for him. Maurice is operations director for Korda Europe, which is a mega busy and mega stressful job. He gives his life and soul to the company, so doesn't get to do long sessions very much, so I'm well chuffed that he's bagged a big one.
Look at this incredible 53 pounder, which I caught last night. Beautiful fish. The swim which I'm fishing in is very, very weedy, and I went out with my colleague RJ in the boat with the echo sounder to find some clear spots. They were very difficult to find, and the ones we found were very, very small, just enough to place 1 rod on. And I think with the weather changing, the southwesterly winds picking up, this has been just perfect. Last night everything came together. I'm really, really happy.
Julien has really got his spots rocking and has had the busiest night of the week so far, bagging 3 gorgeous fish, including 2 PBs. The first was a scaly stunner that is often called a glass carp on account of its glass-like eyes. Who cares how big they are when they look like this? Julien's adapted his style of fishing perfectly to this lake. Trois Iles suits anglers used to using boats, and Julien does this almost every week, so I was super keen to pick his brains about his approach, as I'm a novice when it comes to using boats. After chatting with Julien, he tells me he's actually fishing over the top of a sunken tree that sits on top of a raised area at about 80 metres. Julien's fishing well past the tree into what we've nicknamed the Bermuda Triangle, a section of water between all 3 islands that's beyond the casting capabilities of 99% of anglers, myself included. The carp know they're safe here and they mass up in numbers, especially in colder weather. Julien's fishing onto clear areas as far into the triangle as he can. Accuracy is still important, so it's not just a case of blasting them long, you have to be on a clean spot so the rig is fishing effectively. Fishing so close to weed and snags means you have to be hyper alert at all times, which can be really draining. You have to formulate a plan to land the fish well before you actually hook one, as Julien explains.
When I have a take, I have to look where she is going, and if she's gonna left, I have to jump in a boat to take him.
Serious fishing then?
Yeah.
So when you, because I don't use boats a lot, so, and I always worry, I have 3 rods out, a fish comes on one rod, I have to jump in the boat. How do I stop going through the other lines?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
I don't know if I'm lucky or not.
You go out really wide?
Yeah. At the start, and after my trajectoire, my way.
The trajectory,
with the boat is always calculate about the fish reaction. So if I have the tree over there, I have to go with the boat over there.
Right, okay.
To keep the fish out.
Right, so you go in the opposite direction to the snag. Right, okay. And how much that spot you had that fish on? How many runs have you had on that spot?
On this one, 2.
2.
Yeah, 2 on this one.
And
the bream, but
and a bream. Right, okay. But they're still eating the bait, aren't they? They're still eating the bait.
Yeah.
So how much bait are you putting in every day for that one spot?
I can't count every day. It's every bite.
Every bite?
Every bite,
Right, okay.
When I have a bite, I'm baiting maybe 500 gram.
Right, half a kilo boilie.
Yeah, half a kilo. Yeah, half a kilo boilie. Yeah.
Okay, so if you get a run on Monday, after the run, half a kilo boilie.
Yeah.
If you don't get a run on Tuesday, no more bait.
Yeah.
Right, you're 100%. The bait is still there.
Yeah.
Right, okay, that's really good. That's really good.
Julien's next fish is a new PB mirror at just over £63. It's a proper chunky one with wicked colouring and is exactly the sort of fish that I love to catch. These special carp are what keeps us coming back to France, especially to lakes like Trois Iles. Julien's final fish of Thursday night was yet another personal best, a huge common of just over £70, which everybody wanted to come round and see. Julien fishes public waters most of the time, so he rarely has access to such huge fish. He's fished his socks off this week, and no one deserves a big one more than him.
Donc pour cette canne-ci qui est posée à 130-135 mètres, je vais, commun à toutes mes cannes, un camo leader, monté en montage hélicoptère mais avec la fameuse perle HeliSafe derrière. L'important et toute l'utilité de cette perle-là, c'est que si jamais au contact du poisson, avec toute l'herbe présente dans le plan d'eau, parce qu'il faut dire qu'il y a quand même beaucoup d'herbe sur le fond, on va avoir, il y a 3 mètres d'eau en moyenne partout et on va avoir plus de 2 mètres d'herbe quasiment, surtout sur les 80 premiers mètres. Donc c'est vrai que si on prend un poisson et qu'on a encore le plomb de 140 grammes pendu dessus, ça va tout de suite donner envie au poisson de descendre et ça va le tirer vers le fond, donc du coup il va foncer dans l'herbe et ça va compliquer la suite du combat. Donc ce que je fais, c'est qu'avec l'HeliSafe, on peut choisir soit de perdre le plomb ou non. Donc là en fait, au contact du bas de ligne sur l'HeliSafe, ça va ouvrir la petite agrafe, on ne le voit pas très bien mais on le verra après et du coup hop, ça va me permettre de pouvoir libérer le plomb. Et dans ce cas-là, en fait, le poisson, on met la canne haute, le poisson, lui, va monter sur la couche supérieure de l'eau et ça va nous permettre de pouvoir faire le combat relativement tranquillement. Il faut quand même être vigilant, mais ça aide beaucoup. Ensuite, derrière, un peu plus technique, donc là, le bas de ligne en lui-même. On va être sur un Combi Link. L'avantage, c'est qu'on va avoir une présentation hyper naturelle et en plus de ça, on va avoir une première partie qui va être en boom, donc très 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 rigide, hyper discrète, un vert teinté comme ça qui, une fois posé sur le fond, que ce soit sur un fond un peu argileux ou sablonneux ou même du gravier, on ne le voit franchement pas. Les sleeves pour le sertir, pas besoin de faire de nœud, ça tient, c'est indestructible comme ça. Et derrière, je vais mettre une terminaison en tresse. Donc, pourquoi le Combi Link? Simplement pour, en fait, quand je vais lancer, ça va complètement éviter les emmêlages. Le bas de ligne il va être très rigide, il va partir vraiment très droit et une fois qu'il va tomber dans le fond, le plomb va heurter le fond et lui, le bas de ligne, il va se déployer correctement comme ça. Et ça va permettre de pouvoir mettre mon èche équilibrée ou flottante le plus loin possible du plomb. Et en même temps, bien la présenter s'il y a un petit peu d'herbe tapis sur le fond ou si c'est pas très propre, ça va permettre de pouvoir la poser vraiment très proprement le plus loin possible. Du coup, la terminaison qui elle est en arme à cordes, hyper souple, ça va me permettre du coup d'avoir une présentation très naturelle et si le poisson commence à se nourrir tout autour de l'èche, avoir une bouillette comme si c'était une bouillette d'amorçage qui se promène tout autour et qui bouge tranquillement. En plus de ça, vu que c'est un équilibré, elle va être beaucoup plus. Tout est relatif, mais elle va être plus légère que les autres, ce qui fait que les moindres mouvements autour vont faire qu'elle va bouger et ça va attirer la curiosité du poisson et pouvoir l'inciter à venir s'en saisir.
With Julien's fish safely returned and all the anglers wound in, we got together with the owners, Olivier and Nicole, to celebrate what has been a fantastic week.
Lady and gentlemen, a toast. Thank you very much to Olivier and Nicole for looking after us so well, and thank you to the massive Carp for becoming our friends. And thank you to all of you for coming as well. Cheers.
It's added loads to my fishing, and behind the scenes we've made great plans for next year and had a proper laugh in the process. The week's not over yet, and with a few anglers still to catch, it's important for them not to give up and keep on trying to the bitter end. The bites kept coming on the last night, which is often the case as the fish get more and more used to the angling pressure and return to baited spots they fed on during the week. It was great to see Frank in Swim 12 bag one right at the death. Frank's from our German sales team covering the central, north and eastern parts of Germany. He's watched others catch around him all week and he didn't let his head drop once and stuck to his game plan, fishing his favourite wafter on an IQD rig over a big spread of boilies. It's paid off with this stunning grey mid-30 common. He's understandably made up and that long drive home will pass just that bit easier with a fish under his belt, and we all know how that feels.
Last minute bite.
Big Frank Carrossier in Swim 6 tried his heart out all week, and after some disasters with cut-offs, he finally landed a 40-pound mirror on the last night, a just reward for Frank's determined attitude. The final fish to come out was from the ever-consistent Julien. He's really got his spots rocking now, as is often the case on these week-long sessions. We've kept a note of all the bite spots and winning tactics, so when we come back in 2 years' time, we'll have an even better chance to bag some more Trois Iles monsters.
My best memory of the week is not the last night, the night before. I made my 2 PBs in the night, so that was just incredible. At 32 kilos common and 29 kilos mirror, so just crazy. We meet everybody just one time a year, so it's always a very good week. And when you have the fish, that's perfect.
Being social with all the guys, being here, it's nearly winter, cold fishing and catching fish all over the lake. Especially the big moment with the big fish of Jon. Yeah, it was amazing.
Highlight of my week, definitely the big fish, yes. It would be the highlight of everyone's week, I'd like to think. Not of anyone's week, should I say, you know. To catch a fish of that size, well, it's something you set out to do but never expect to do. So yeah, that's got to be the highlight of the week.
My favourite bit of a brilliant week has to be Jon Mann catching the 87-pounder. He's just absolutely blown away by it, and he's a super nice guy, puts loads of effort into the business. Almost everybody's caught from one end of the lake to the other. It's just been an amazing experience, and I look forward to the next one.